Ha-jun stood across the street from a cafe at 11:47 p.m., rain soaking through his coat, watching a woman laugh. She was laughing at something on her phone, head tilted back, completely unbothered and alone. He had a folder on her. 3 weeks of surveillance. Name, Monique Coy. 26 years old. African American. Graduate student, international law, Seoul National University. Sharp academic record, sharper tongue, no known romantic ties, no criminal record, and absolutely no idea that the documents sitting in her university email were the reason powerful men were losing sleep. Ha-jun's instructions were clean: get close, retrieve the evidence, make her quiet. He had done harder things before breakfast. Except Monique looked up from her phone, looked directly through the cafe window, directly across the rain-soaked street, and found him standing there. She tilted her head. Then she mouthed something. He couldn't hear her through the glass. But she held up her phone, counted 20 with her fingers, then pointed at him with a very specific expression that said, "I see you. I have always seen you." Then she went back to her phone. Ha-jun stood there for another 30 seconds, which he would never admit to anyone alive. Then he walked into the cafe. She didn't look up when he sat across from her. She scrolled another few seconds, finished whatever she was reading, and only then gave him her full attention. 23 minutes, she said. You were standing outside for 23 minutes. I was thinking. In the rain. I do my best work in difficult conditions. She stared at him. You look like a crime documentary. One of the expensive ones. He didn't answer. She went back to her phone. He ordered coffee he didn't want and sat in a chair he had no business sitting in, across from a woman he was supposed to consider a problem, and she treated him like furniture. That was the beginning of everything going terribly wrong. If you are new here, subscribe right now because this story is only getting more intense from here, and you do not want to miss a single second of it. Monique Coy had not come to Seoul to fall in love. She had come to finish her degree, secure her internship at a human rights nonprofit, and prove, quietly, to herself, that she could build something real in a country where she knew almost no one. She kept her circle small. Her best friend Aaron had followed her from New York, which she pretended to be annoyed about and was secretly grateful for every single day. Beyond Aaron, she trusted her professors, her work, and her instincts. Her instincts, the first time she saw Ha-jun properly in daylight, said, trouble. Not dangerous trouble. Well, dangerous, yes. Expensive and deliberate, and the kind of man who had never once apologized for taking up space. But she had grown up around men who used their silence as a weapon, and she had learned early that the best response to intimidation was to simply refuse to be intimidated. So when he appeared at her cafe the next morning, she said nothing. When he appeared near her campus 2 days later, she nodded once and kept walking. When he showed up at the bookstore on a Saturday and somehow ended up in the same aisle, the international law section, which she doubted he had any academic interest in, she finally stopped pretending. Are you following me? He pulled a book off the shelf, looked at the spine, put it back. I enjoy bookstores. You picked up a book on maritime law and didn't read the title before opening it. He paused. I have varied interests. I'm sure you do. She faced him fully. What do you actually want? He looked at her for a moment, really looked, the way people do when they're deciding something, and then said, coffee. Tomorrow morning. I'll be at your cafe. You mean the cafe you've been at every morning this week? Yes. That's not an invitation. That's a statement. I know. She turned and walked away. He watched her go. The next morning, she sat across from him again. Neither of them mentioned that she had chosen to come. His name, he told her, was Ha-jun. Just Ha-jun. She didn't push for more, which he appreciated and found slightly unsettling because most people either pushed or completely avoided the question, and she simply filed it away like she had better things to do with her energy. She was writing her thesis on criminal networks and international accountability. The irony of this was not lost on him. He said nothing about it. She told him she had grown up in Atlanta, that her mother was a schoolteacher, that she had gotten her first library card at 4 years old and considered it one of the most important days of her life. A library card, he repeated. Don't look at me like that. It's a gateway. First the library card, then you're reading everything, then you have opinions about everything, then nobody can tell you anything. She stirred her coffee. Some people say that like it's a problem. I wasn't going to say it was a problem. You were thinking it. He was thinking something else entirely, but he kept that to himself. She was relentless in conversation, not aggressive, but honest in a way that left him no cover. She asked him what he did for work, and when he gave her the careful answer, private sector, financial consulting, advisory, she tilted her head and said, that sounds like 3 real things used to describe one thing you don't want to name. You study international law. You know how to read between lines. I know how to read between lines, she confirmed. Which is why I'm telling you that whatever you do for money, it's not clean. Silence. You're not leaving, he said. I didn't say what you do is my business. She shrugged. I said it's not clean. Those are different sentences. Ha-jun sat with that. In 20 years of running the most feared criminal network in Seoul, no one had ever made that distinction to his face. Sunwoo, his right hand and the only man he genuinely trusted, noticed the shift within a week. You've been at that cafe 4 times, Sunwoo said, setting a file on Ha-jun's desk. I like the coffee. You sent your assistant to buy you coffee from there yesterday morning, while you were already sitting inside it. Ha-jun said nothing. Sunwoo sat down, which he only did when he had something uncomfortable to say. The people above us are asking for a timeline. Tell them I'm handling it. You've been handling it for 3 weeks. Then tell them I'm handling it slowly. Sunwoo looked at him for a long moment. Ha-jun. She's not just a target. She's a complication. Everything is a complication. That's why they pay us. They're not paying you to have coffee with her every morning. Ha-jun picked up the file, opened it, closed it. I'll handle it. Sunwoo left. Ha-jun looked at the window. He thought about the way Monique had laughed that first night through the cafe glass. Completely unguarded. Like she had no idea the world was watching. He picked up his phone and texted her. Dinner. Tomorrow. I know a place. She replied 3 minutes later. You look like a man with at least 3 secrets and 2 crimes. Why would I have dinner with you? He typed back. Only 2? Her response came immediately. I'll think about it. She came to dinner. The restaurant was private, quiet, the kind of place where powerful men had conversations they didn't want recorded. Monique walked in wearing a deep burgundy dress. She had clearly not dressed up specifically for him, which somehow made it worse. She sat down, looked at the menu once, set it aside, and said, okay. Tell me one true thing. He looked up. 1. Start small. Work up. He set his menu down. I grew up in Busan. My father ran the same network I run now. When he died, I didn't grieve. I took over. I have never once considered doing anything else. She was quiet. That's not small, she said finally. You said start small. I gave you the real version. Your father didn't grieve you either? When he was alive. The question landed somewhere he hadn't expected. He picked up his wine glass. He respected me. That was sufficient. No, it wasn't. She said it simply, without pity. Respect and love are not the same thing. You already know that. He looked at her. Now tell me something about yourself, he said. She thought for a second. My father left when I was 9. I used to write him letters I never sent. When I was 20, I burned them all. She met his eyes. I thought burning them would feel like release. It just felt like burning paper. Something in Ha-jun's chest moved that had not moved in a very long time. They stayed at that table for 3 hours. When he drove her home, she got out of the car, then turned back and said, Ha-jun. He looked at her. Whatever the 2 crimes are, she said, I hope at least one of them was worth it. She went inside. He sat in his car and did not move for 6 minutes. Sunwoo called. He didn't answer. Erin noticed first. He's at the cafe again, she said, not looking up from her laptop. That's 5 days this week. Today is Thursday. Monique didn't answer. Monique. I heard you. He looks at you like, Erin searched for the word, like you are a problem he created for himself. That's a lot of analysis for someone who hasn't met him. I don't need to meet him. I have eyes and I am deeply protective of you. Erin finally looked up. He's not a regular guy. I know. Do you? Monique looked out the window at where Ha-jun sat, reading a newspaper he almost certainly wasn't reading. Yes, she said quietly. I know exactly what he is. And I'm still here, aren't I? Erin made a sound that was not quite concern and not quite acceptance and put her laptop away. What Monique didn't say out loud, what she barely admitted to herself, was that Ha-jun had quietly become the most honest person in her life. Not because he told her everything. He told her almost nothing. But what he said, he meant. He never performed interest. He never flattered. He sat across from her and listened to her like she was the only conversation worth having, and for a woman who had spent years being underestimated, that attention felt dangerously close to something she couldn't name. He remembered her coffee order. Always. He sat through her full 40-minute rant about international courts and institutional failure without once checking his phone. He argued with her genuinely, without softening himself, and when she pushed back and proved her point, he said, "You're right," with no hesitation and no ego. And once, when she had reached across the table to push a book toward him and her hand had accidentally stayed on his for 3 full seconds, he had gone so completely still that she thought something was medically wrong. She had pulled her hand back. He had picked up the book and stared at the first page for 4 minutes without turning it. She had looked away and smiled into her coffee cup. Ha-jun was, by every objective measure, falling apart. Sunwoo watched it happen in real time and was professionally devastated. You practiced, Sunwoo said flatly, standing in the doorway of Ha-jun's office. Ha-jun looked up. Practiced what? You asked me yesterday, and I want to be very clear that I am saying this out loud. You asked me yesterday to help you practice a normal conversation. A regular, non-criminal conversation. As though you were a human man on a date. I was preparing. You asked me to play the role of a woman who was annoyed at you for being intense. That is an accurate description of her. Ha-jun. Sunwoo sat down. I have worked for you for 11 years. I have handled situations that would destroy smaller men. I am not equipped for this. Then improve. This is not in my job description. Ha-jun leaned back in his chair. The practice helped. Sunwoo put his face in his hands. But the truth Ha-jun was not ready to speak, was that every day he delayed the order was a day he was choosing Monique over the men who controlled him. And those men were not patient. They were not forgiving. And they were beginning to ask questions he couldn't answer with "I'm handling it forever." The document she held, accidentally forwarded to her research account through a leak in a source she'd been studying for her thesis, connected financial crimes across 3 countries, named politicians, and buried deep in the chain. It named Ha-jun's network as a corridor for laundering funds. Not proof enough to convict. Enough to destabilize. She didn't know what she had. But the people at the top of his chain didn't care about what she knew. They cared about the risk. And Ha-jun, for the first time in his life, was refusing a direct instruction. Not loudly. Not with confrontation. Just with silence. And silence, in his world, was its own kind of answer. It ended on a Tuesday. No warning. No dramatic storm. Just an ordinary afternoon when Erin called Monique's name across the apartment and said, "Come here. I need to show you something." It was a document. A name. Cross-referenced across 2 investigative articles buried deep in a legal database Erin had access to through her own work. Kim Ha-jun. Linked to the same financial network Monique had been researching. The same network her forwarded documents connected to. Monique read it 3 times. Then she sat down. Then she stood up. Then she put on her coat and walked to his building. He opened the door before she knocked. He had probably been notified she was in the lobby. That made it worse. "Who are you?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand. He stepped back, let her in, said nothing. She turned to face him. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Yes." "When?" Silence. She felt the silence like a physical thing. "Ha-jun." "When?" He looked at her. Not with coldness. Not with performance. With something worse. Clarity. The look of a man who knew exactly what he had done and couldn't undo it. "I approached you because of the documents," he said. "I know. I was given an instruction. to retrieve the evidence, and he stopped. And what? You know what? She did. She had known since the night she saw him outside the cafe if she was being fully honest with herself. She had known something was wrong, and she had stayed anyway, because whatever he was, he had never once made her feel like a target. But knowing and hearing it were different things. Did you care about me at any point, she said, or was all of it strategy? Ha-jun crossed the room. He stopped 2 feet from her, and his voice, when it came, was not the controlled voice she was used to. It was raw in a way that changed everything. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to explain what happened. I came to you with one purpose. And then I stayed because he stopped. Tried again. I stayed because you were the first person in years who talked to me like I was a man instead of a weapon. Monique's throat tightened. And then I ruined everything, he said, by loving you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back. I need to think, she said. She left. He let her go. Sunwoo found him an hour later sitting at his desk, not working, not moving, staring at nothing. She left, Ha-jun said. I know. I told her the truth. All of it. Enough. Sunwoo sat. Then you know what you have to do next. Tell me anyway. Go find her. Not as the man who was sent after her. As the man who stayed. Ha-jun looked at him. You cannot manage this like a contract, Sunwoo said. You cannot wait for it to resolve itself. You have to go and tell her the rest. Ha-jun stood up. No bodyguards, Sunwoo said. Ha-jun paused. Go as yourself, Sunwoo said. Just yourself. That's the only version of you she actually chose. He found her at the Han River. Not because he tracked her phone, though he could have. He found her because in 4 months of learning Monique Coy, he had learned that when she needed to think, she went somewhere open. Somewhere with water and space and no walls. She was sitting on a bench, not looking at her phone, watching the river. He sat down beside her. She didn't turn. No guards. No. First time. Yes. The river moved. Somewhere across the water, the city glowed. Tell me the rest, she said. So he did. He told her about the family he inherited. The empire he had walked into at 22 years old when his father collapsed in a meeting and never woke up. The years of learning a world he hadn't asked for and couldn't leave. The code of silence that had kept him alive. The men above him who saw people as either assets or problems. He told her she had been flagged as a problem. He told her he had delayed the order for 3 weeks before he'd even spoken to her properly. He told her he had delayed it for 3 months after. And now, she asked. Now I'm sitting on a bench by the Han River with no backup, which is the most reckless thing I have done in 11 years, and I feel more like myself than I have in a decade. Monique was quiet for a moment. Then, are you asking me to accept everything you've done? Everything you are? No. He turned to look at her. I'm asking you to trust that I love you. The rest is already complicated. It was complicated before you. It will be complicated after. But what I feel for you has nothing complicated in it. It is the clearest thing I have. She looked at him. Really looked, the way she had the first morning in the cafe, when she had decided to stay instead of walk away. You could have made her disappear, she said quietly. And you didn't. No. Because of the documents? Because of you. She looked back at the river. He waited. I'm not going to pretend your world is something I can fully accept, she said. I'm not going to tell you I'm okay with everything. Because I'm not. She paused. But I'm also not standing here pretending I don't know who you are. I've known for a while. I stayed anyway. Why? He asked. She glanced at him. Because you remember how I take my coffee. Because you argued with me for 40 minutes about international law and then told me I was right without flinching. Because you went completely still when I touched your hand and you thought I didn't notice, but I noticed. He said nothing. I'm not interested in saving you, she said. That was never my plan. But if you're asking me whether I trust your heart, she met his eyes, then yes. That's the part one trust. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. No more half-truths, she said. Agreed. She tilted her head. And no more standing outside cafes in the rain for 23 minutes like a threat to public safety. He looked at the river. I make no guarantees. She laughed. And for the first time since he could remember, Ha-jun sat somewhere completely still, no plan, no exit, no strategy, and felt nothing but settled. Months passed. Monique did not become someone different. That was the part Ha-jun had not anticipated, that loving her would not require her to shrink. She remained exactly who she was, stubborn, brilliant, deeply allergic to pretension, and completely unimpressed by his reputation in rooms where his reputation was the only thing most people could see. She finished her thesis. She challenged him on things that were worth challenging. He adjusted where he could, which was not everything, but more than anyone had ever asked of him and more than he had ever offered. She learned that strength looked different in his world. Less visible, more weighted. She respected it without needing to agree with it. Their relationship was not simple. It was not a fantasy. It was two people with full, complicated lives making a deliberate choice over and over to stay honest. Sun-woo called it the most chaotic stable situation he had witnessed professionally. Aaron called it completely insane, but also the most real thing I've seen from either of you. One evening, at a private dinner, just the four of them, which was its own miracle of coordination, Monique watched Ha-jun argue with Sun-woo about something completely minor. The exact location of a dinner reservation. He was being, by any reasonable measure, dramatic. She watched him for a moment. He caught her smiling. What, he said. Nothing. You're doing the thing. What thing? The thing where you're thinking something and deciding whether it's worth saying. She leaned forward. You are the most feared man in Seoul. Correct. And you have been arguing about a table location for 11 minutes. Sun-woo coughed. Ha-jun looked at her. She leaned a little closer. For a ruthless man, you are unbelievably needy. Sun-woo made a sound that was definitely not a laugh that he immediately converted into a cough. Ha-jun straightened. I am respected. Deeply, she said. Then she kissed him. And the most feared man in Seoul, in front of his right hand and her best friend, had absolutely nothing to say, which was somehow the most powerful she had ever seen him look. Because he wasn't performing strength. He was just happy. And that, for a man who had spent his whole life treating vulnerability as a liability, was the bravest thing she had ever watched anyone do. If he had followed the original order, Monique Coy would have disappeared from his life, like every completed job before her clean, final, forgotten. Instead, she stayed. Not because he forced her. Not because she had no choice. But because they had both looked at the full truth of what this was, the danger, the history, the distance between their worlds, and chosen each other anyway. That was the part no one in his empire had prepared him for. That love, real love, doesn't arrive as a reward. It arrives as a question. Are you willing to be fully seen? Ha-jun, for the first time in his life, had said yes. And Monique, who had always trusted her instincts above all else, had trusted the one thing she could not quantify, that beneath everything complicated and dangerous and unresolvable, the man in front of her was telling the truth. In a world built on power and silence, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story kept you watching all the way here, drop a comment right now and tell me, did you see their love coming from the start, or did Ha-jun completely surprise you? Like this video if Monique's honesty hit different, and subscribe because the next story is already written and it is going to absolutely wreck you. Thanks for watching. See you there.